lost my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
Join me on Patreon to watch up to 5 episodes of this series and others in advance that are live right now. With that said, enjoy. I want to go! I want to go! I want to go! Kakarot's voice pierced the twilight air like an energy blast ripping across a battlefield as the suns over planet Vegeta began their slow descent behind the crimson clouds. Shadows stretched long across the rocky surface. The bitter wind howled between the jagged cliffs as the planet's native predators began their nightly prowl. This was the hour when most Saiyan warriors settled down after a long day of drills, hunts, and skirmishes. Gin had just sealed the final crate at the supply depot. Her back ached. Her hands were stiff inside her gloves. She was ready to collapse in her chamber and steal a few hours of peace before the night's silence was broken again. Unfortunately for her, it was already broken by her son and loudly. I want to go! Kakarot hadn't stopped begging for nearly a month. For over 3 weeks now, he'd pestered her with the same wild demand, day after day. He wanted to hunt. At first, Gin had laughed at the idea. It was cute even. Brave little Kakarot, trying to act like a full-grown warrior. But the more he pressed, the more she realized he was dead serious, and that made her anxious. It wasn't just that he was small or young. Saiyan children were bred for battle. No, it was something deeper. Kakarot wasn't ready. The beasts of this planet, while no match for a full-grown Saiyan, still possessed claws sharp enough to rip into flesh and instincts honed by survival in the harshest conditions. A child who couldn't fly, who barely understood his own energy. He'd be nothing more than bait. Gin sighed as she peeled off one of her gloves, sweat sticking to her skin. She turned to head inside, brushing past her fiery little son as he glared up at her with crossed arms and a scowl far too large for his face. Behind her, a familiar voice chuckled. Looks like he just won't let it go, huh? Gin glanced to the side to see Gumil, a rounder, cheerful Saiyan woman who shared her worker's rank. She was wiping oil from her hands with a rag, nodding toward the scowling Kakarot. Gin shook her head, lips tight. I don't know what's gotten into him lately. Ever since Raditz left, he's been on a warpath about going out to hunt. Gumil scratched the corner of her lip, eyes narrowing thoughtfully as she stared at the stubborn little Saiyan. Seems to me, he's not just asking anymore. He's demanding. There was a weight in her voice that Gin caught. But Gumil moved on before she could question it. Truthfully, Gumil remembered what Raditz had told his little brother before shipping out. Words wrapped in cold pride and dismissal. Raditz had barely spared Kakarot a glance. It wasn't hard to guess why the boy was acting out. Gumil wasn't a mind reader, but even she could sense Kakarot wanted to prove something. She didn't say all that though. No need to psychoanalyze a kid throwing a tantrum. Anyway, we're done for the day. I'll see you tomorrow. As always. Gin offered a tired smile. Gumil clapped her thick gloves onto the metal table with a soft thud. I'm getting my daughter shipped in tonight. Late delivery. Ah, right! Gin brightened. You just had her. I almost forgot. The memory rushed back in. Her own pregnancy. That strange but warm sensation when she'd first realized she was carrying life inside her. A rare flicker of joy on planet Vegeta. Have they decided what they're doing with her yet? Ellery'll be with us soon. I'll raise her right here at the depot, same as me. Once she's old enough to walk and shout, I'll strap gloves on her and she'll be sorting crates like the rest of us. Jin's smile deepened. I'm happy for you. Thanks, Gin. Really. With a wave and a snort, Gumil vanished down the corridor, leaving mother and son alone once more. Gin turned slowly. Her expression stiffened as her eyes met Kakarot's. The boy was standing tall on the metal counter, arms crossed. Fire lit his eyes. Pure, unshakable defiance. And something about that glare made her freeze. He looked just like Bardock when he was angry. That same fierce determination, that refusal to back down. A cold breeze swept through the depot. Come on, she said gently, trying to diffuse the moment. Off to bed. No, he snapped. His voice was sharp, raw, almost commanding. Not until we go. There was a tremor of Kai building behind his words, faint and unstable. But there, she didn't like that. Jin's brow furrowed. Sorry, but I'm not taking no for an answer. She reached out swiftly, grabbing his tiny hand in one firm motion. Kakarot yelped, squirmed, and tried to pull back, but it was no use. She hoisted him off the counter with practiced strength and cradled him tight, ignoring the kicks, the flailing fists, the snarls. He wriggled like a feral cub, but Jean had dealt with far worse. "Let me go! I said let me go!" he shouted. "Enough! You'll hurt yourself, Kakarot," she scolded, carrying him toward the barracks. "I'm not weak." "No, but you are reckless," she snapped back. They reached his room, small, simple, no more than a steel pod with a sleep capsule inside. She plopped him in gently, brushing a lock of spiky black hair from his forehead. He turned away. The door hissed shut. Getting him into bed was one thing. That part was a victory. But getting him to sleep? That was going to be an entirely different battle. Night had taken full hold of planet Vegeta. The crimson glow from the twin moons cast a cold silver sheen across the rocky land. The desert winds whispered against the jagged cliffs, sweeping dust in small spirals along the ground. Inside one of the more modest dome-shaped homes, a soft hush filled the air. Jean's quiet snores echoed faintly. She'd fallen asleep sitting up, her head tilted just slightly, with her arm wrapped around the empty side of the bed. Kakarot hadn't even closed his eyes. Lying still against her lap at first, his gaze had been locked upward, unblinking, unmoving, just staring at the metal roof above them. But it wasn't the shadows, or the cold air, or even the noise of the wild outside that kept him up. It was something sharper, louder, a voice that wouldn't stop echoing in his mind. "Weakling, you probably wouldn't be able to hunt an animal, so you're better off with a freebie," Raditz's voice. Those words stung like a hot blade. It wasn't just the memory of Raditz's boot kicking him back across the training ground. It was the look in his older brother's eyes when he said it. Cold, unimpressed, disappointed. Kakarot's tiny fists clenched under the sheets. He didn't completely understand what strength meant yet. Not the way warriors did, but he knew this much. Being strong meant not getting looked down on, and he was done being looked down on. If his mother wouldn't let him go out there, then he'd do it himself. Slowly, cautiously, he peeled the blanket off and shifted his weight from Jean's lap. Every movement was deliberate, every breath silent. He paused to make sure she didn't stir. Her soft breathing stayed steady. Good. Slipping out of bed, Kakarot lowered himself to the floor, making sure his bare feet didn't make a sound as they touched the cool stone beneath. The air bit at his skin, but he didn't flinch. His eyes went straight to the armor on the hanger, sized just for him. He pulled it off the rack, the metal and padding sliding together with a low scrape. Within moments, he'd slipped into the combat gear, chest plate, gloves, boots. It wasn't much, but it made him feel bigger somehow, stronger. His tail swished once behind him. Then, without looking back, he slipped out the front door and into the night. The world outside felt huge. The stars above looked like millions of tiny eyes watching him from far away. The ground stretched endlessly in all directions. Cracked earth, sharp ridges, and distant mountains that looked like sleeping titans under the moonlight. He had never walked more than 50 yards away from home, but tonight, he was determined to walk until something found him, or until he found it. And when he did, he'd prove he wasn't a weakling. Not to Raditz, not to his mom, not to anyone. He marched forward, past the familiar rock by the hill, past the dried-out stream bed. With every step, the weight of fear dropped behind him. He didn't know where he was going, but it didn't matter. Freedom felt good. What he didn't realize, though, was that he wasn't alone. High above the jagged spires of rock, hidden in the shadows of the cliffs, a pair of sharp eyes watched him with keen interest. Gumil. She stood on a narrow ledge far overhead, her power level dampened, her energy quiet. The night wind tugged at her cape as she stared down at the little figure marching bravely across the landscape below. Her arms were crossed, but her expression was half concern, half curiosity. She'd just returned home after receiving her daughter, Ellery, who now rested safe inside a heated incubation chamber. Gumil had barely finished settling in when she spotted a small figure sneaking through the outer district. Kakarot, her eyes narrowed. Sly little runt. She shook her head slowly. Had it been any other child, she might have turned a blind eye. Let them learn their lesson. But this wasn't just any kid. This was Jine's son, and Gumil knew exactly what he was doing. He hadn't been let out to hunt, so now he was trying to do it alone. The fiery gleam in his eyes earlier made sense now. She could see it in his stride even from up here. The stubborn fire, the defiance, the hunger to prove himself. Kids like that either turned out to be champions or tragedies. She sighed. She knew the dangers. what lurked in the wastelands. The razor-billed Chotars, the three-eyed Neros, or worse, rogue Saiyan predators who lived on the fringes of society, battle-crazed outcasts with no honor. Kakarot wouldn't last 5 seconds against them, so she took to the sky, rising quietly above the rocky terrain, keeping her distance while floating silently above him. From this height, she could observe everything. If anything threatened him, she could intervene before it was too late. Let's see what kind of mess you get yourself into, kid. But her eyes stayed locked on the boy for so long, she didn't realize something else was watching. Someone, not from the ground, but from even higher, far above the clouds, past the drifting satellites and artificial moons. Cloaked in a veil of distorted light, another presence lingered. Silent, unseen. It observed both of them, its energy masked, hidden perfectly, like a ghost in the void. And unlike Gumiel, it wasn't just watching for fun. Kakarot's legs burned as he pushed forward through the red dust and dry wind of planet Vegeta, but his determination drowned out the ache in his body. His short breaths came quickly, but not once did he slow down. This wasn't a game anymore. It was his mission, to prove himself. He'd already left his village far behind. The buildings and training posts were now distant specks, swallowed by endless plains of cracked stone and twisted trees. Eventually, after hours of wandering through desolate stretches of wilderness, he came across a strange open field, lush and green, unlike the dry wastelands he had just walked through. The grass here leaned sideways under the constant pressure of the wind, but none of it bent far enough to snap. It swayed like a giant ocean of green waves. Ahead, thick trees rose into the night sky, their dark branches twisted like claws, home to bird nests and animal dens. Kakarot paused. This was the place. It had taken him 3 full hours of non-stop walking, yet not a single ounce of exhaustion showed on his tiny frame. Sleep wouldn't come tonight until he had something in his hands to bring home. Something he caught. His eyes caught movement. A group of 4-legged creatures, low to the ground, slow, deliberate, stalked through the tall grass ahead of him. Their heads dipped close to the dirt as if sniffing out prey. He couldn't name them, but their size and lean muscle told him they were hunters, just like he wanted to be. Instinctively, Kakarot mimicked their movements. He dropped into a crouch, knees bent, tail low to the ground. The thick grass nearly swallowed him up due to his small stature, but he didn't care. Inch by inch, he crawled forward like a predator in training. Above him, hidden in the thick canopy of a nearby tree, Gumiel watched from the shadows. Her eyes were focused, her breathing shallow. Now was the moment of truth. The boy had set his sights on a dark, black-coated animal not far from him. It had a scar carved over its left eye, and a body like a powerful feline, muscle-bound and thick-pawed. It stood still, completely unaware of the small Saiyan boy stalking from behind. Gumiel's brow furrowed. He's really going for it. She could feel the tension even from this distance. Kakarot's excitement showed in the grin creeping across his face. He could see his target now, clear as day. His body twitched, almost ready to spring. He dug his feet into the dirt, just a little closer. Just one perfect leap, and it would be his. Snap! A sharp crack cut through the silence. The cat-like beast's ears shot up. Before Kakarot could even react, it bolted, vanishing into the grass and disappearing like a puff of smoke. A rush of air and loose dust slapped Kakarot in the face, leaving him wide-eyed and empty-handed. He hissed, "Oh, what was that?" He whipped his head toward the sound. The snapped branch had come from the dense forest just ahead. Still crouched, Kakarot adjusted course. Eyes narrowed. There was still something there. Something that might be better than a cat. This time, he'd be smarter. Quieter. He crept through the grass until he reached the edge of the tree line. He found cover behind a thick trunk and peered out. There, a creature emerged from behind a bush. Tall, wide-shouldered, and walking upright on 2 legs. It was a bear, but not quite. Its back was covered in short, stiff fur. A long trunk jutted out from its face, and massive curved fangs gleamed beneath it. 3 smaller versions of it, its cubs, walked beside it. Kakarot's eyes lit up. This was it, his chance. He knew he couldn't take the mother. She was too big, too strong, but the cubs, the smallest one, lagged just a step behind the others. That one he could catch. He crouched even lower. This kid is confident, Gumiel whispered to herself, still tracking his every move from above. But she was so locked in, so focused on the boy's tiny steps and bold approach, that she didn't notice something more immediate. Her own weight beginning to shift the branch she sat on. The thick branch cracked beneath her with a slow, groaning sound, too slow for her to react. Crack thud! She dropped like a boulder. Her body slammed into the ground with a jarring impact. Dirt flew up, birds burst out of trees, and the echo rattled across the clearing. Crud! She groaned, grabbing at her side. Kakarot spun around instantly. The bear's ears twitched. All 3 cubs turned their heads. Then, the entire group took off in a burst of speed. No, no, no! Kakarot shouted, leaping out from behind his cover. He didn't hesitate. He darted after them, kicking up dirt, tail streaming behind him. His boots barely touched the ground. The mother bear was quick. She powered ahead, muscles pounding the earth. Her firstborn cub stuck close behind her. The second cub kept up well enough. But the third, the one Kakarot had picked, it was slower. He was gaining fast. His short legs pumped like pistons, breath rapid and light. His power surged, not in a blast, but in raw physical speed. Step by step, he closed the distance until... Now! Kakarot sprang forward, launching himself like a missile from low to the ground. His tiny frame crashed into the cub's back, knocking it off balance. The two rolled together, a mess of limbs and fur tumbling through the bushes. Kakarot bit, scratched, kicked. He dug his nails deep into the cub's back, pushing with all his strength. The animal kicked and roared, trying to shake him off, but he held firm. Bushes rattled, grass split. The scuffle was wild, messy, real. Finally, he slammed both hands onto its head and forced it down. The cub thrashed. He didn't stop. He clawed and punched, landing blow after blow. Blood began to spill. The cries of the cub grew weaker, then stopped. But Kakarot didn't stop swinging. The animal was already dead. He just didn't know it. Gotcha! He grinned as he kept hitting. Blood coated his gloves. His knuckles ached. His tiny face twisted into something feral, something almost unrecognizable. To him, the creature was still moving, still fighting back. He didn't know about nerves. He didn't know about death. He just knew he had to keep hitting until it stopped moving. And so, he did. The heavy stomps of the mother bear shook the earth, pounding closer and louder with every second. The sharp sound of her rage-filled growl tore through the clearing like thunder. Kakarot turned his head at the sound, eyes narrowing in excitement instead of fear. That deep, bone-rattling growl wasn't a warning. To him, it was a challenge. He stood up quickly, kicking aside the dead cub beneath him, like it was no longer worth his time. His breathing was wild, fists tight, heart thundering. He didn't back down. He didn't even flinch. If anything, he leaned forward. "Come on!" he shouted. The mother bear roared again, louder than before. Her voice was filled with anguish, fury, and pure animal instinct. Then she charged. Kakarot had just a moment to register the motion. The next instant, crack! He was flying through the air. The force of her strike sent him hurtling like a missile, crashing through one tree after another, each trunk snapping apart like dry wood. He finally slammed into the ground, rolling violently to a stop. The center of his chest plate was cracked, shattered right down the middle. He gasped, his back arched, body twitching. The pain in his chest burned like fire. It hurt to breathe. His muscles throbbed, his vision spun, and yet he got up. His knees shook. His armor was scratched and broken, but he stood. Any normal kid would have run, but Kakarot was Saiyan. He rushed forward again, screaming, fists raised. He leapt, landing on the beast's shoulders and hammering his fists down on her skull, over and over. His strikes were wild, reckless, sloppy, but they had spirit. The mother bear let out a pained grunt. She shook wildly and then grabbed the boy by his waist, lifting him like a rag doll. With a vicious snarl, she slammed him straight into the dirt. The ground cracked beneath the force. Kakarot's vision blurred. His stomach turned. Before he could catch his breath, the bear lifted him again. Slam! Then again. Slam! Then again. Slam! Each impact sent tremors through the ground. His body bounced like a doll with every strike. Blood trickled from his nose. His arms went limp. His tail hung motionless behind him. His eyes rolled back. He was slipping into unconsciousness. And still, the bear didn't stop. She raised one foot, heavy and thick, aiming to crush his throat and finish it completely. Boom! A sudden flash of movement. A powerful punch landed clean into her side, sending the mother bear flying, tumbling backward through the grass in a heap of dirt and fur. Kakarot's limp body remained on the ground, unmoving. A moment later, a shadow moved toward him. She limped as she reached him, her breathing strained from the fall earlier. She wasn't fast enough to save him from the attack, but she wasn't the one who landed the punch either. Whoever had saved Kakarot was gone or hiding. She didn't have time to investigate. Kakarot, she whispered, bending down and lifting him carefully. There was no response. Blood dripped from his armor. His head lolled to the side. Hang in there, kid. She hoisted him over her shoulder and blasted into the sky, shooting through the wind with everything she had left in her. No scouter, no reading, no idea if he was even still alive, but she wasn't going to stop. The doors of the infirmary burst open. Within moments, Kakarot was laid out on a stretcher and rushed into a medical bay surrounded by humming rejuvenation tanks. Inside each one, glowing colored liquids bubbled steadily, releasing streams of light blue and green across the room like glowing veins in the walls. Moments later, Gumil bolted out of the med bay, her armor cracked, face streaked with dirt, and sprinted to alert Gin. She didn't even have to knock. The moment Gin opened the door and saw the panic in her face, she knew something had gone horribly wrong. Within seconds, Gin was in the air, racing faster than she'd ever flown. Now, standing beside one of the glowing tanks, Gin pressed her hand gently against the glass. Inside, suspended in glowing liquid, was her son. Kakarot's small body floated with tubes attached to his chest and sides. The tank hissed softly, releasing a steady stream of bubbles as machines regulated heat and internal healing patterns. Her reflection hovered in the glass, eyes wide, lips trembling, pupils locked onto the bruises, the blood, the deep claw marks across his side. He looked like he'd been mauled by a monster. The lights inside pulsed steadily, the monitors chiming in sync. One of the lines on the screen showed his heart rate was stable for now, but Gin knew the truth. Rejuvenation tanks were not perfect. They could heal nearly anything, but not everything. There were cases, rare ones, where Saiyan warriors didn't make it out, and her mind flooded with a memory she had buried for years. Bardock, covered in blood, his body in one of these very same tanks, and all because of her mistake on a mission long ago. That day, she'd made the decision to stop fighting. She'd sworn she'd never let anyone she loved end up like that again. Yet here they were. Kakarot, she whispered. A warm hand pressed gently on her back. Gumil. She had cleaned herself up, but her face carried the same guilt Gin now held in her chest. I'm sorry this happened, Gumil said quietly. Gin's eyes didn't move from the glass. She was holding back tears, but just barely. Her voice, when it came, was small, cold, and trembling. Why didn't you stop him from attacking them? Gumil froze. What? Gin turned slowly, face flushed red with anger, shoulders tensed, fists clenched at her sides. You said you followed him, right? Her voice cracked with raw emotion. Then why didn't you stop him? Gumil's heart dropped. She could have lied, could have said she got there too late, could have deflected, but that wasn't who she was. I had confidence in him, she said, voice shaking. I really believed Kakarot could handle himself. I didn't think things would turn out like this. And someone else got there before I could even act. Gin's mouth opened, ready to fire off again, but she hesitated. She hadn't spoken to a single doctor yet. She didn't know Kakarot's true condition. Her fear had turned into blame, and she knew it. Her shoulders sank. She turned back toward the tank, pressing her palm against the glass once more. Kakarot's heart rate still pulsed, still beat, but she knew that could change at any moment. Yeah, she muttered. Sorry. She closed her eyes and took a deep, slow breath. I just feel hurt, Gumil said, placing a hand gently on Gin's slouched shoulder. I know. I've lost people I cared about, even when they didn't care about me. I know that pain, but I promise you. She looked toward the tank, her voice steady now. He'll be okay. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.